Alright everyone, welcome to the Tonto's Demise Week 13 recap. Last week of the regular season, there could have been a whole lot of shaking up going on in the final standings. We could have had a bunch of teams finish with either 6 and 7 or 7 and 6 records. I know we talked about it before in the past couple weeks, going into the final 2 weeks, that if things would have played out the way they could have, we could have had what was it, like 7 and 6 teams or something like that, which would have been, for me at least, a dream come true just to see something like that happen, the craziness of that. But wasn't quite meant to be. But like I said, it seems like every year we get to like the last week or two, and well, this could happen or this could happen and that could happen. If he beats this person and that person loses to this person, and they could drop out of the playoffs, they could get a bye week, they could do all sorts of this and that and this and that. And every year there seems to be much ado about nothing as far as a dramatic standings shuffle. Really no one who was in going into week 13 dropped out, even though they actually very much could have, but it wasn't quite meant to be. So let's just try to think if there's anything that I want to address before we get into it. I don't think so. I think there's been plenty going back and forth on the message or the Smack Talk board over the last 2 days. So I won't really get into that, but that's up for everybody to openly discuss as they see fit. But all right, let's just jump right into Week 13, which always, of course, we start with the defending champion, who will not be the defending champion much longer, not getting an opportunity to defend his championship, I guess I should say. That was FC Bohoric. He was going up against the Springfield Isotopes, who needed to win to get into the playoffs, and the Isotopes were able to knock off FC Bohoric. Final score here is 170.8 to 131.2. Big differences here. Quarterbacks were pretty much even. Alex Smith to Drew Brees. Let's see. Demaryius Thomas, Julio Jones, almost the exact same score. Big difference. Okay, we had Stevie Johnson here. He actually scored 0. Excuse me. So you had Vincent Jackson. He got 11.7. Not too bad, but that 0 really hurts. Giving you only 30 points, almost 30 points from your receivers, which Antonio Brown, just by himself, with his long touchdown bonus on that punt return, he actually had 40 all by himself. So with 17 and 14 from Julio Jones and Golden Tate, that's what, 40 and 28, 68, almost 70 points from the wide receivers there. That's really the biggest difference maker in this matchup, is that 70 to 30 there. Abdullah and LeGarrette Blount, almost even, 67 yards for Abdullah, 54 for Blount. No catches, no touchdowns, anything from either one of them. Let's see, C.J. Anderson and Charkandrick West going against each other. Pretty much exact same thing again here. 35 yards from West and 42 from C.J. Anderson. No touchdowns again. Tight ends, Greg Olsen here for FC Bohoric, with a big advantage with Gronkowski out. Olsen is probably the number one tight end in the league right now. He actually got you just under 20 points. Jordan Reed only 6.5 on Monday night. Let's see, in the flex, FC played Roddy White, took out his usual CJ Spiller, rolled the dice with Roddy White. Actually ended up being a little more beneficial to you points-wise than CJ Spiller would have been, but the total was still only 6.3, while Jarvis Landry actually somehow managed to only have 2 catches for 5 yards, only 2.5 points. Easily his lowest output, perhaps, of his career, definitely for the season. Let's see. Kickers, pretty much even there too, just a couple points from each one. And defenses, another advantage here was Cincinnati defense. They had about, Yahoo says 21. I think it was closer to 30. While Buffalo Bills defense, the difference was, let's see, Yahoo says 8. I think we tacked on about 4 or 6 points for you extra. So it was about 30 to 15, something like that. So, well, yeah, Drew Brees outscored Smith, but there's a huge advantage there in the wide receiver department. Like I said, running backs were all pretty much a wash. They were all really canceled each other out in terms of points. You made up ground with Greg Olsen, 13-point difference there, 4-point difference between Roddy White so the ground you made up gotten canceled out then by the defenses. So wasn't enough here. I said about a 40-point difference. And as for FC Bohoric, the defending champ, he ends the season at 4-9. He is in 11th place. Well, say he's in 11th, but he's well ahead of the 12th place team. So I guess that's something to hang your hat on. Just wasn't meant to be this year for FC Bohoric. A lot of disappointment, especially, I mean, you were fairly heavily invested in the Denver Broncos after the draft, especially. I mean, you had C.J. Anderson in your pocket as a keeper, 10th round pick. And then you took Demaryius Thomas, I think, with the first round pick, maybe second. No, I think Drew Brees was your first rounder. Demaryius would have been second. So that's a tough spot to put yourself in. You're relying on those guys. Anytime you're relying on more than one person from the same team, it's really a tough spot to put yourself in. Although, I mean, one could argue that if you had both Antonio Brown and D'Angelo Williams, or even before Le'Veon Bell this year, you'd be sitting pretty week to week. But that's quite an unusual case. I think it's definitely not typical. As for the rest of Dub C's lineup, just taking a quick look, I know he still has Keenan Allen, who is on IR. That was a big loss for him. Keenan was one of the top scoring wide receivers in the league, at least fantasy-wise, before he got injured and was done for the year. He was he was good, but he was extremely inconsistent. Just taking a quick look at his game log here. I mean, he would have 15 catches, and he would have 2, then 12, then 4, then 14, and then 5. So he was really extremely hit or miss. Even when he was in there, you really you never knew what you were going to get. If he was going to get you 35 points, or if he was going to get you 10 or 11. So that was definitely a big loss. What ended up being the all-around ineptitude of the Broncos defense, or not Broncos offense, I should say, from the beginning of the season, and which I am well aware of. So Demaryius Thomas, quite a disappointing year for him. Even Drew Brees, he's been really hit or miss, but it's been You probably expected more from your receiver core, and just were never really able to latch on to a solid flex play, I think, was one of the biggest problems here. This season for FC Bohoric, I mean, taking a quick look at his lineup up and down, and I don't really see anyone who, I know he was flexing CJ Spiller quite a bit. Started out with CJ Anderson in the flex. I'm not looking at the free agents, so I can't remember if there's anybody else who he would have been using earlier in the season that got injured, and he had to find replacements for. Let's see. Let's take a look at the old draft board. Justin. Nope, that's pretty much it, I think. He had some pretty good defenses. Said Drew Brees should be usually a top quarterback. He's going to get you. And he was consistently getting you, in the 40s. Let's see. He had a couple down games, but he also had a couple of gigantic games. As you know, he set the single week record for the league this year with his 91-point performance in whatever week that was, a couple weeks ago. But, like I said, FC, you were hoping that maybe CJ Anderson or Spiller would come through, but you were just never really... Your receivers were kind of let down. Vincent Jackson was hurt a lot. CJ Anderson has battled some injuries too. So like I said, that was probably even Buffalo defense has been hit or miss. Surprisingly, they seemed like they were going to be pretty strong this year, but they started out really well, but they've kind of been, like I said, hit or miss. They've trailed off the last half of the season, I think. So really, that's probably if I'm trying to find faults in your lineup here, I would just have to say that your receiver core, which looked good at the beginning of the season, like I said, suffered that tough injury with Keenan Allen. Who knows where you would be with him, but you were really just never quite able to get yourself a flex player that could contribute big points week in and week out. And so that was probably, in my opinion, the biggest difference maker for you this season. So better luck to you next year. Hope you can tell your wife that unfortunately she will not continue to be the first lady of Tonto's Demise next year. We'll have to wait and see who that's going to be this year. If it's Gags' wife again, the good news, I guess, is if Gags wins the championship again, you'll probably just get to keep the trophy because he won't want it. His wife won't let him have it in the house. So, so that's possibly the one good thing that could come out of this for you. All right. Anyway, let's take a quick look here. What's next? All right, we had the Commish going up against the Dub C Hooligans. Dub C was trying to possibly steal a bye week from the top two teams who have pretty much been at the top for at least half a season now, at least quite a while. While the Pups, they were really just trying to play spoiler because they're several games behind. They've only won once this year. It almost actually could have happened for the Pups, but it didn't. It wasn't quite enough. Dub C Hooligans took this one down. The final score here, 148.9 to 131.45. Let's see, taking a look at your lineups. David Carr, or is it? No, it's Derek Carr, right? Which I don't know which one is it. Derek Carr. Not David Carr. That guy was horrible. Anyway, those two, Carr and Stafford, almost the exact same score, 44-42. Marvin Jones to Crabtree, 1 point difference there, 16.5 to 15.5. Nate Washington versus John Brown. Brown won that one, 17-10. Let's see, Moncrief versus Devontae Adams. Devontae he had 4 catches, only 20 yards though, but he did have a touchdown, so he wins 12-4 on that one. Let's see, picked up Spencer Ware. WC played him. He got only 26 rushing yards, but he did get you a touchdown. Jeremy Hill actually scored you there. He had 98 yards and a touchdown. Let's see. Andrews from Tennessee, 58 yards and a touchdown. While Thompson for the Pups had him in a running back spot. He actually only had 6 rushing yards. Almost all of his points came from receiving, so those got canceled out for you. Tight ends, pretty much the same score, 4.3 to 3.8. Half a point difference there, Rudolph versus McDonald. Your flex plays, Pups had in Doug Baldwin, who's been on fire the past couple weeks. I think he had 3 touchdowns against the Steelers, and he had actually 2 more this week, 94 yards. He had 26.4, outscoring Dub C's flex, who was Sean Drawn, who has been made relevant out of nowhere. Well, I recall the name from a couple years ago, but I don't know where the 49ers, what scrap heap the 49ers dug him up from. But with Carlos Hyde looking like he's going to be done for the season, they've basically picked this guy up and I think he played every snap, it said, for the 49ers. So who knows, who cares or knows who Sean Drawn is after the next couple of weeks. But the guy's going to get you fantasy points, so might as well throw him in there. He got just under 20 for you this week. I think it said here somewhere. Yeah, Sean Drawn played every single snap of offense not this past week, in week 12, for San Francisco. So, hey, the guy's going to produce some points somewhere. How can you not if you're in every play of the game? This could have been the difference maker, I thought, possibly, as the Pups have had Matt Bryant in at kicker for the past few weeks, even though he has clearly been out. And you do have another kicker on your bench, so there's really, and I understand, okay, I'm not calling you out and for not putting importance on your fantasy football lineup. I understand all the things that you've been very busy with the past couple weeks. It's not a big deal. That being said, it would take 5 seconds to go on your phone and swap out your kickers back and forth, because Bryant got 0, and the other kicker actually had 14.4, which would not have been enough to win here if you if you had gotten a little bit more from some other people. So you had a chance on Monday night with Thompson, but as we kind of knew, most of his points were going to come from the receiving game. So all I'm saying is that if the difference had been small enough, that it was 17 points here, 17 and a half, if the point total would have been less than that 14.4 that your other kicker had gotten, and you could have beaten Dub C just by swapping out your kickers. Like I said, on one hand, I understand that you were very busy these past couple of weeks. You had a lot going on. This was the least of your priorities, probably. but at the same time, we do kind of try to pride ourselves, if anything, I guess, on the integrity of our league, where we, no one gives up, no one no one trades away or drops people. We fight all the way till the end, and we set our lineups even if we're totally out of it every week, just try to maintain that integrity and not slip into that late season state that some teams in some leagues can fall into, where they just give up. Because really, like I said, Dub C could have, with this win. I mean, yeah, he gets the win, but if you had possibly could have beaten him, that could have stopped. That could have stopped him from potentially getting a bye week, or even he could have moved all the way up to first place if he had actually done a little bit better. But so yeah, the point is every matchup matters. Usually, even this time of year, even if your team is pretty much done, you're trying to keep other people. You can't just hand other teams wins just because you're out and you just have given up. Anyway, like I said, you got a 0 for your kicker, Pups, and Gostowski only 4. Defenses, Detroit they were actually doing a lot better until the last play of the game when they gave up the winning touchdown. So they gave that gave Green Bay too many points and gave you the loss. So that took away a bunch of points from your defense there. As for Carolina, looks like they only had one turnover, 2 sacks, but they did get the win, but they gave up a ton of points. Yahoo says 5. I think it was maybe 12 or 15. You might have gotten some points for probably rushing yards in there somewhere, but there was a lot of yards and points all over that game, so not the 44, 47 points you were getting from them the past 2 weeks. So anyway, long story short, I guess. Dub C wins this one, although, like I said, he did not get enough points to catch up overall to Boston Magic. He could have possibly overtaken him, but they pretty much scored the same thing this week. So he wasn't able to gain any ground. And let's see. And he possibly could have moved up to first place too if the Rook had lost, but that did not happen either. And so Dub C finishes in 3rd place. He's 9-4. And we'll still be able to talk about him the next couple of weeks, or at least for one more week. As for the Raritan Pups, the commish already clinched the cursed Philip Rivers jersey quite a while ago. You finished the season 1-12. Not much to say here. Looking back on your draft and your season, potential was there. You started out pretty strong with your keepers. I think everybody thought you had Jeremy Hill and Andrew Luck. Hill looked like he was ready for a breakout season. After, I think, the second half of last season, he really took off. Looked like he was going to be big. Andrew Luck is Andrew Luck. I think he was one of the highest, if not the highest, he was one of the highest scoring quarterbacks in our league last year. So you had to feel pretty good coming out of the draft, going in with your team, taking a look at your lineup here in your bench. First round, you plucked up Marshawn Lynch to pair him with Jeremy Hill, a strong running back core there. but unfortunately, Marshawn Lynch he's been battling injuries all year long. I don't know that he's really done much at all for you, even when he's been in. So that's been tough. Andrew Luck was kind of struggling before he's been out with injury for several weeks now. He played, let's see. He played the first 3 weeks, then he missed 2 weeks, and then he played 4 weeks. He actually wasn't doing too bad. He started off kind of slow, then he missed 2 weeks. Then he came in and he had a couple pretty good games, but then he got hurt and he hasn't played since week 9. So it's been Derek Carr for you. He's been pretty hit or miss. You went heavy with Seahawks. You got Doug Baldwin, Marshawn Lynch. Who else? Jimmy Graham was your tight end also. So you were really invested in the Seattle Seahawks, which is always going to be questionable. They've always been, at least, not the past few years where they've kind of established the roster. They've been traditionally here a run first, good, strong defense team. So it's tough. I think if you look at Russell Wilson, I don't think anyone actually owns him right now. I think he's a free agent quarterback, even though he's actually done pretty well the past 2 weeks. He was huge against the Steelers, as we know, and he actually did pretty well here against the Minnesota Vikings this past week. But all in all, he's extremely hit or miss when it comes to a fantasy quarterback for our league. One of the biggest things I remember looking at your roster, coming out of the draft, taking a look at everybody's rosters up and down, just kind of see where it looks like things stand. And I remember what really was surprising to me, and I thought, oh man, Jimmy is going to be in a really tough spot because post-draft, looking at his lineup, including his bench, he only had a couple of running backs. I guess I can just take a look at the board again here. I think the story of Jimmy's season can be summed up just by looking here at his draft board, as you can see, this is him right here. The green stickers are running backs. So that's it. That he came out of the draft with Marshawn Lynch, Jeremy Hill, Fred Jackson, and Taliaferro from Baltimore. So that's it. And I remember noticing that and thinking, wow, he really needs those running backs to step up and not get hurt and produce, and hoping that some of those running backs or those wide receivers come through. And as we can see, it didn't quite work out for him this year, which kind of makes me laugh because you may recall that pretty early in the draft, actually Jimmy himself turned to me and said, I think I know what you're doing. You're doing the no running back, all heavy wide receiver, heavy draft strategy. Which, to an extent, is true, but I believe I've already made my opinions on the running back position pretty clear, where those stand, in my opinion. But anyway, So you were extremely reliant on your wide receiving core coming through, picking up the slack. But unfortunately, it has been very little for you. Um, just taking a look, you had Marvin Jones, Nate Washington, Moncrief, Doug Baldwin. Let's see, you got Green Beckham, Mike Wallace, who I think you traded Aguilar for. You had Colston, you had Malcolm Floyd from San Diego. So none of the, and just, so that's how many? 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's 8 guys. And you bought 8 lottery tickets, and none of them really cashed. So that's just unfortunate luck for you. I'm sure. Obviously, expectations for anybody who was on the Colts this year were pretty high going into the season. Not so much right now, but so that was pretty. I mean, that's been pretty much the story of the season for the Wolves. The running backs have been either unproductive, injured, or both, and the receiving core just not really there, and really no number one wide receivers. Just went with a lot of guys who kind of hoped that they would do something, and just it did not pan out in any way, shape, or form for you through the course of the season. Unfortunately, sometimes that's just the way it goes. You may remember that the Wolves did set the record this year for the lowest single week point total. You were by far the lowest point scorer this year. Take a quick look at the final standings. Pups, you only finished with 1,560 points, which was you were about 350 points behind the next person, who was Josh. Everybody else was over 2,000. So you were essentially 500 points behind almost everyone. So, which I guess that might be fair because if you look at last season, the Wolves set the single week record for points scored with 275, and I think he had the highest overall point total. I can't remember, he might have been the number 1 seed going into the playoffs, but he had the highest point total overall by a pretty significant margin last year. So from one extreme to the next, year to year here. So that pretty much was the season for the Wolves. We'll wish good luck to him in all future seasons and endeavors, I guess. But as we all know, I believe it's been established that fantasy football and Tonto's demise is the least of his concerns for the past month or so. But don't forget that you do owe Tree his knockout pool money, and you owe now the Rook for winning the regular season title. And so that's pretty much it for that matchup. So I guess I'm starting a trend here where if you're done for the season, I'm kind of just going to give you a little end of year kind of recap here to see, kind of try and pinpoint where things went wrong for you. But next matchup, we had Vanilla going up against Twerkin Bullcuts. Twerkin needed this one and a lot of help to sneak a playoff spot. Unfortunately, neither one of those things. He couldn't get the win, and he could not get the help that he needed either. So it ended up not mattering. Vanilla gets the win here, 182.1 to 147.3. Take a quick look here. Your quarterbacks, Brady versus Bortles, almost the exact same. I feel like I'm saying this with every matchup here. Almost the exact same score. Bortles 63 to Tom Brady's 66. Fitzgerald versus Decker. Decker takes this one 13 to 18. Travis Benjamin versus Randall Cobb. Benjamin actually looks like he got 0 for you. I think he actually got hurt early in that game and never came back. So after he had a huge game last week, what did he have? Over 20 points last week with a touchdown. Unfortunately, injured early this week, so he didn't do too much for you. Cobb, let's see, 12.8. He didn't really do much receiving-wise, but he was in the right place at the right time for, I think it was a James Starks fumble that fell forward into the end zone, and Randall Cobb was there to fall on it and get you 6 points for that. Sanders versus Hopkins. Hopkins wins this one 20 to 5. Hopkins has been one of the best wide receivers all year long. Forte versus Yeldon. They both scored almost the exact same thing according to Yahoo, but we cut a lot of points for your receiving stats. Yeldon looks like he had 57 and a touchdown, while Forte had 84 and a touchdown. So a slight advantage to Forte here. Alfred Morris versus Rawls from Seattle, filling in for Marshawn Lynch. Rawls takes this one down pretty easily. He was over 100 yards and a touchdown, while Alfred Morris managed only 12 rushing yards, only 1.2. Tight ends, you picked up Chandler, plugged him in since Gronk is injured. He had 60 yards and a touchdown, 16 points, while for Vanilla, Vernon Davis had 2 catches before I think he got a concussion and was knocked out of the game. Your flex plays, almost kind of even, not much difference, 22 to 18 in favor of Danny Amendola over Deshaun Jackson. Stat lines are pretty much the same as you would expect. Amendola, 7 for 60. Jackson, 6 for 80. And they both had touchdowns. Kickers here, Janikowski actually got 0 because he missed a field goal and he missed a PAT here. And Robbie Gould, a couple field goals, about 10 points or so from him. And your defenses, St. Louis going against the Jets. Jets, they won their game. St. Louis got routed by Arizona. So that was a big difference maker here too. Jets defense, couple sacks, couple turnovers. St. Louis, 2 sacks. I want to say that a lot of those points got cut off. I feel like Arizona. So they got the 2 sacks. And Yahoo says 5. I want to say that the actual defensive score from the Rams this week was -1 because there was too many points. I think there was too much everything, and you only had the 2 sacks and you got the loss, so that's -3. So I want to say you ended up at -1, and we had to cut a lot of your running backs. Had to cut a lot of their receiving numbers off. So I'm just going to take a quick look here and tell you exactly what it was for Twerkin. Yeah, we actually had to cut almost 24 points from your team for this matchup, just from receptions lost from your running backs. But usually, quite often, those points are made up for, at least a little bit, by your defense. But like I said, your defense got you -1, I believe. So that was a difference maker here. Jets defense, Yahoo says 12. It might have been a little bit more than that, but I think Eli did fairly well. They gave up a lot of yards and stuff like that. But it wasn't enough for Twerkin. He finishes the season 6-7. Said he was hoping to squeak a playoff spot here, but it wasn't meant to be. He was actually, I think you were in the playoff hunt for most of the season and dropped off the past about 3 weeks. But then you tried to make a fight back up. I think you dropped way down. Let's see. Take a quick look here at Twerkin. Let's see. You were 0-3. You were 2-4. 2, 3, 4, 5. You were 5-4, 5-5, 5-6. So yeah, you were actually doing fairly well up until week 10, when you finished the season losing 3 out of 4. So that definitely hurt. So I think you were right around playoff contention up until that point. But those 2 losses in week 10 and 11 really hurt you, knocked you all the way down to maybe 9th or 10th. But you fought your way back up a little bit. So you ended up 8th, I believe. So just wasn't quite meant for you to be this year. You made some moves that some people didn't like. Sometimes it was fun to jab you for it, but I don't blame you for the Blake Bortles move, especially long term. Looks like he could end up being your quarterback of the future for the next 2 years. So if that's what ends up happening, you can stack up your team in the first couple rounds of the draft, knowing that you got Bortles in your back pocket, not having to draft a quarterback early. Let's see. Taking a look at your team, overall standpoint. Your receiving core was pretty good. Overall, I think you made a couple trades. I can't remember what exactly you had before, but Fitzgerald had a great season. Trade for Emmanuel Sanders. That didn't pan out. He just hasn't really done much. Like I said, with the entire Denver Broncos offense was a huge letdown most of this season. Garcon was pretty hit or miss. Eifert was a great pick. Yeah, he's injured this week, but other than that, he's been performing pretty well. Got to be one of the top scoring tight ends in the league this year. Rams defense, hit or miss. They've been unfortunately miss more often for you recently. Your running backs, a lot of potential there in your running backs, but still. So you got some young guys, you got some old guys. Yeldon and Rawls, I think, are rookies, or at least first or second year. And you had Frank Gore, who, much like said, the Colts and the Broncos really have been fantasy disappointments overall this year. As for Twerkin, a lot of things. So things didn't quite fall your way this year. You were, I think we already discussed a little bit, I think, on the Smack Talk and the message boards that maybe previous reviews, that you have been a pretty consistent scorer this year. I believe, what was the number, 158? That your team scored 158 points, 158 point something, 4 or 5 different times this year. So you were right in that area almost every week this year. If we can just take a quick look at your lineup. Yeah, I mean, you were right in that ballpark. Your highest score of the year was only 163, which is that's an average score. Uh, no, that's kind of right. That's middle of the road kind of score where you could win, you could lose, you really don't know. It's up in the air based depending on the matchup. Um, so yeah, only 163 was your highest score. Um, well, you had 1 week where you had only 94 points. Other than that, your lowest score was 135. So outside of that 1 week where everything went to hell, you were between 135 and 160, right in that ballpark every single week. I think you survived the knockout pool, not until the end, but pretty close to the end. So consistency was definitely good for you this year. So when you're in that ballpark, like I said, 135 to 160, somewhere in that range, who knows what's going to happen? That's the gray area where you could win, you could lose, you really don't know. It's going to come down to just pure coin flip luck, whatever it's going to be. So, and you could almost say it's you got a 50-50 chance of winning with that score. I guess every week you have a 50-50 chance of winning, but winning or losing. But anyway, that should balance itself out, much like a coin flip. Between heads and tails, the more often you flip, the more those numbers balance themselves out as even, and which is kind of what happened here because you were 6-6, and you finished, so you were even going into the last week, but you lost and you were 6-7. So wasn't just quite enough this year. So your point total was fairly low, and so when your highest score is only 163 for the whole season, and you're right in the same score every week, it's just probably not going to be enough for you to get it done. Like I said, even though there really weren't a lot of holes in your lineup. Maybe the running backs will get better next year. Have to wait and see who you keep for next year and what you go with. But it's looking pretty good. So this season wasn't a total disappointment for you. You did fairly well, so I can't really find a lot of fault for you. Just things didn't quite fall your way. That's just the way it goes. So we'll look forward to you coming back next year and maybe putting up a little bit stronger effort, and maybe things will fall your way a little bit more than they did this year. So that's your 2015 season, Twerkin Bowl Cuts. You end up in 9th place and at 6-7. As for Vanilla, he is 4th place. He is 8-5, but his season is not done yet, so we'll still have at least one more week to talk about him. All right, keep on moving before this video turns into an hour and a half. Midgets. We had Midgets going up against the Huber Squashers. Midgets took this one down. Final score 208.95 versus 171.1. The only 200-point score this week came from Mighty Midgets, mostly thanks to Allen Robinson and his 46 points. Let's see. Here we had Matt Ryan versus Roethlisberger. Roethlisberger wins this one, I think 44-67. Let's see. So you had about a 20-point advantage from your quarterback here, Squashers, but you got squashed by the Mighty Midgets receiving core. Brandon Marshall actually had 30, 31. Like I said, Allen Robinson, 46. Brandon LaFell, 6.7. So 77, 80, over 80 points from the Midgets receiving core this week. While Squashers, your receiving core, Calvin Johnson, T.Y. Hilton, and Ruben Randall, they combined to score just under 25. So 80 to 25, that's a huge difference. They get probably the difference maker in this one, because your running backs pretty much you actually got the running backs went in favor of the Squashers. D'Angelo Williams had over 100 yards, while, let's see, Ronnie Hillman had 56. So you got about 20 points from those two, while Stewart and Murray combined for about 100. Combined, they about 100 yards and a touchdown. So 16 points or so. So that was in favor of the Squashers. Let's see. Tight ends, Barnage versus Bennett. Barnage won this one, 11-4. Flex plays, David Johnson from Arizona, who is relevant again thanks to the injury to Chris Johnson. I think he's done for the year. While Squashers, you put in Danny Woodhead in your flex. He got you 6.5. So another huge advantage there for the Midgets. Kickers, looks like Bailey from the Squashers doubled up Brown from the Giants, from the Midgets. So advantage to Squashers there. And defenses, let's see. Kansas City looks pretty good according to Yahoo. A couple turnovers, a touchdown. But Arizona, let's see. Arizona's defense for Squashers, they only have one turnover. But the difference here is, Yahoo only says 12, but they kept the stats really low. I think it was definitely a lot more than 12. You actually might have won this matchup versus defenses, just thanks to low yardage totals from the St. Louis Rams. But it wasn't enough. Like I said, Midgets needed to win this matchup to have a chance at sneaking a playoff spot. But I believe, according to the math, he was actually eliminated mathematically going into this week, because the best record that he could have was 6-7, while that was also the worst record that teams like the Huber Squashers or the Isotopes could have had, and he was too far behind in points behind the Isotopes to get a playoff spot. If the last playoff spot had gone to a 6-7 team. Anyway, but Huber Squashers, you were 6-6. If you had won this matchup, you could have maybe made a playoff spot, but you needed some help, or you would have needed help if you had won this one, which you didn't get because the Isotopes did win, and they were ahead of you in points. So we say goodbye. Actually, I guess we can say goodbye to both of these teams and see where things went wrong for them. Mighty Midgets made a couple trades, had a pretty decent. Let's face it. I think Eddie Lacy is pretty much dead weight. You drafted him number 3 overall, got rid of him, managed to get Jonathan Stewart, who was a huge advantage, an upgrade over Eddie Lacy this year. Matt Ryan, just I wouldn't say he was disappointing. He wasn't terrible, but you're kind of hoping for a little bit more than he's been able to put up this year. He's had a lot of 40-point games. He got some 50-pointers, a 60-pointer. but you're hoping for more consistent 50-pointers from him, based on past history from him. But fairly consistent. You needed just some things didn't fall your way. In other areas, your receiving core, Brandon Marshall, I think he was. Let's see. Brandon Marshall was a 4th-round pick. He's been one of the best wide receivers of the whole season. Allen Robinson, you kept him. He was a late-round pick. He started off kind of slow, but he has been tearing it up the past few weeks. He's been a consistent ever since week 5. He's been a consistent scorer in the teens, high teens, low 20s. He blew up this week for 46. So a good play every week from him. Let's see. So you traded away Eddie Lacy. You're kind of juggling running backs here. Had Latavius Murray. Played him a lot. You traded for DeMarco Murray, who has pretty much he pretty much balances out Eddie Lacy, because both of them have just been huge disappointments pretty much all season long, outside of maybe 1 or 2 good games for DeMarco Murray, which really only came earlier in the season. Well, just looking at his game log, he's had a couple of good games, more like 4 or 5 good games. But it looks like, unfortunately, the games where he was really good, you needed to have him in your flex. Otherwise, he was a significant portion of his value was diminished. Let's see. You had the Giants defense most of the year. Till recently, you picked up Kansas City, which was a gift, I think, from the Rook. Probably a regrettable move on his part, he would tell you. Traded for Barnage, which you had Witten as your tight end before. He was hit or miss all year, mostly thanks to, especially thanks to Romo being injured. But he has also been battling some injuries himself, so he hasn't been quite the same as he usually is. So all around, the Cowboys' defense has struggled. A lot of the season, they didn't have Dez, and they haven't really had Romo for almost all the season, all of the year now. So, said midgets, you had some pretty solid. Your lineup was solid week in and week out, but things just didn't. I'm becoming cliche, I guess here. Things just didn't fall your way this year. So your quarterback was fairly consistent. Sometimes let you down. I think you lost a lot of close matchups. That was probably the big key to your season, I want to say. Midgets. You lost. Let's see. Some of your losses here. You only lost by 3 points to the Rook. Well, I guess maybe I was wrong. That was really the only loss that was really close. Let's see. So you had a lot of big scores put up against you too. Some could argue that yet something had to do with it. You were actually the highest scored against team this year. That has something to do with probably your bad, some difficult losses. But you were right on the bubble until the end here. Now you ended up 6-7. You ended up in 7th place. Tried to fight your way up most of the year. Just said a lot of things just didn't go your way. And even though you had a high point total, but you said you were highly scored against, and a couple problems with your running back. Yeah, I think you had some inconsistency with your defenses earlier in the season. That created some problems. Maybe cost you a couple games here and there. But yeah, it's luck of the draw. Just wasn't it just wasn't meant for you to be this year. So speaking of wasn't meant for you to be this year, we also have the Huber Squashers that we are saying goodbye to. Also finishing 6 and 7 and 8th place. So you were 7th and 8th here, right in the middle. You were without Roethlisberger for a lot of weeks. Had to try and work around that. You had Michael Vick. You had Brian Hoyer. You had I forget who else you might have used during the course of the season. Take a look. Kirk Cousins. You had him. I think you used him at least once or twice. But when Roethlisberger has been in there, he has been solid and a great play. Till he got hurt in that Rams game, he was doing good. That was week 3. Once he came back, his first game was week 8 against Cincinnati. Didn't look too great, but he still did pretty good. Hurt by turnovers in that game. But after that, even though he had the foot injury, which he ended up really not missing any time because they had a bye week anyway, he's been over 50 and 60. So weeks 9 and 10, he was over 50. Weeks 12 and 13, he was over 60. So he has been pretty much what we expected him to be in terms of fantasy value this year at the quarterback position. Probably one of the highest scoring players there when healthy. Let's see, as for your receiving core, had problems right away with Des Bryant going down. You were able to trade away him and got Calvin Johnson, which has definitely been in your favor overall because Des hasn't done much at all either, even though he's back from injury. He could be one of the keys. He could be I guess he could be an Achilles heel for the Rook actually because he is a victim of poor quarterback play. Poor quarterback play from the Cowboys. And you had Julian Edelman, who was huge all year long until he got hurt. He's definitely off your lineup, off your roster here. Let me see. Let me see if I can see. All right. Okay, so taking a look at your draft here real quick, you drafted Abdullah from Detroit really early. Kind of surprised a lot of people. I don't know if it was based on one good preseason run that he had or what it was, but you gambled on him. You picked up, I think Joseph Randall was one of the running backs that you went with. He had all his problems, as we know. Of course, there is Le'Veon Bell, who you waited for him to come off his suspension, and he was fantastic for a couple of weeks. And then he got hurt and is gone for the year. I'm actually looking at your lineup here, and it says Martellus Bennett is now on IR. So he is done for the year, which he was kind of a disappointment for most of the season, looking at his game log. So it was a tough year, easily, for Huber Squashers, battling injuries all year long, making some trades, trying to work the waiver wire. Arizona Cardinals defense was great for you all year. If you had had a healthy Roethlisberger all year long, and healthy Le'Veon, healthy Edelman, really healthy Dez, who knows what could have happened. I think we started to we were ribbing you a lot for your injuries and stuff, but we weren't. We were making fun of you. We were laughing. We were kind of laughing. we weren't laughing at you, we were laughing with you, I think, because it got to the point where it was so absurd that it was funny with just the constant flow of injuries to your team week in and week out. I mean, what could you do other than just laugh by just the absurdity of it? We're not laughing at you. We're not making, dissing you and your team. Everybody knew that your team had huge potential. So it got to the point where you couldn't help but just laugh and say, well, that's just the way it goes sometimes. But said you were right on the bubble here till the end, even despite all of that. So that's a credit to you and your team and their ability to take some matchups when you got it. As we all know, you scored 100 points one week and you got a win because the Wolves, that was your matchup, and they only scored, I think, 75 points. So took advantage of some opportunities that came your way, but it just wasn't quite meant to be for you this year. So you finished in 8th place, while Midgets in 7th place. So the story of these two teams, I think, Hewer Squashers, huge potential was there, but you got crushed by injuries. Not much you can do about that. And Midgets, you just I don't really know. I think it was just your team was really hit or miss. Solid performances every week for the most part, but just couldn't quite put it all together and get over the hump of get yourself above 500. Drop down pretty quick early. So said your receiving core was great. Your quarterback was often good, never really great, but never really terrible either. So you struggled with defense, I think, a few times. That might have cost you here and there, but we can't all make the playoffs. So you both did, but you both did. The potential was there for both of you to do really well this year, and unfortunately, the cards just didn't fall your way this season. So we say goodbye to both of you, and we'll look forward to your contributions next season. Next, we had the Rook going up against Chips My Boy. This one had playoff potential, consequences at least. And the Rook was able to sneak this one out. Final score is 141.85 to 136.6. Rogers versus Palmer. Palmer, a 3-point advantage, 54-51. Jeffrey versus Cooper, 12-10 in favor of Jeffrey. Jordan Matthews versus Dez, 12-9 in favor of Matthews. But possibly the biggest difference here is Odell Beckham Jr. He had 27 points. I think, did he have a long touchdown? So he might have actually had 30 points versus 11 from Aiken from the Ravens. Your running backs, you only got 18 yards from Adrian Peterson. Huge disappointment because he's been tearing it up recently, just doing great. Not this week though. Not much from Ivory either, 47 rushing yards. Going up against Lacey and Gurley for the Rook. And between the two of them, they actually managed only 44 rushing yards. So only 4.5 points from the Rook's running back core. Tight ends, we had Julius Thomas versus Kelsey. Thomas wins this one by 3, 9-6. Devontae Freeman back in versus McCoy. Freeman actually wins this matchup 14-20. Kickers, 8-1 in favor of Chips, my boy. Defenses, you both kind of got rocked. Houston and New England. Um, I think, I think New England actually, they said 4 on Yahoo, but I think it was actually a lot more than that. It was actually closer to 15, I think. You got a lot of points back because most of the Philadelphia's points came from special teams, turnovers, getting points there. The Eagles' offense didn't actually do a whole lot. So even though they lost the game and gave up a ton of points, you actually got a lot made up back from yardage totals from the Patriots' defense. And as for Houston's defense, Yahoo says 1. It was right around there, if not maybe 4, something like that. So, like I said, here was a 5-point difference. The Rook was actually down 4 points going into Monday night. He needed 4 points from Dez Bryant to get the win here. Like I said, Dez ended up with 9.2. But as you may or may not know, Dez Bryant actually did not have any catches until I think there was 5 minutes left in the game. And he had I think he had a 42-yard reception. So his first catch, he was able to get the points he needed there for you. But he definitely made you have to sweat it out. Like I said, he went the first 55 minutes of the game with not any catches at all. But he ended up having 3 there in those last couple minutes. And that was huge. That was the difference maker here had to be Odell Beckham Jr. and the defense, Patriots defense, actually having decent yardage totals from New England because as I was going down that lineup matchup to matchup, it seems like everyone favored Chips, my boy, except for that big difference here from Odell Beckham Jr., his 30 points. His 30 points alone almost equaled your Chips' entire receiving core. So they had 10, 12, and 10. So Beckham Jr. by himself, equaling your 3 receivers, that always hurts. That's tough to make up there. Fortunately for you, Chips, his other 2 receivers didn't do a whole lot, which gave you a chance to win this one. But I guess I can point out again here, it was the Devontae Freeman effect was in effect here because, it didn't happen last week. I think you won last week, but you did not actually have him in your lineup because he was injured, but he came back this week. And even though he did catch 10 passes, the effect is he did not score a touchdown. If he had scored a touchdown, you would have won this matchup. So he did not, which means you lost. And so with the final, not the final week for you here, but the Devontae Freeman effect, when he is in your lineup here from week 2 or 3 on, it continues to be the same. If he does not score when he is in your lineup, you always lose. So, hopefully for your sake, you're hoping that he will start getting some touchdowns here again. Unfortunately, he's got some tough matchups here in the playoffs, the fantasy playoffs here. So, these are both playoff teams. No need to say goodbye to either one of them. As we mentioned, the Rook, with this win, he finishes in first place for the regular season. So you'll be getting some money for that. And Chips, my boy, you get the win, but you dropped actually from 5th place to 6th place, which changes who you play in the first round of the playoffs. You're going up against Demise, who he ended up being the 3 seed, while the Rook gets a first round bye. And finally, speaking of first round byes, we had Possum Magic going up against the Detonators. And the Detonators actually took it to Boston Magic this week. Almost 200 points. Detonators had 198.9 to Boston Magic's 140.7. So, the Detonators actually, the Detonators almost managed to put up 200 points despite getting only 18.4 from their quarterback, which wasn't much less than actually Philip Rivers for Possum, who only got 25. Another disappointing performance for him. So, but you did get favored there, 25 to 18. Possum had AJ Green. We have AJ Green versus Mike Evans. Green took this one, 24 to 17. Let's see, Macklin versus Watkins. Macklin wins this one, 28.5 to 20, thanks to 2 touchdown catches for Macklin. And let's see, Martavis Bryant versus Anquan Bolden. Bryant wins this matchup. I think he had a long touchdown. I think was it long or no? It was only 63 yards. I want to say it wasn't. Was it? Oh, no, it was 6. Yeah, it was 68. Maybe that was last. Did he have a 63-yarder last week or something? But all right. So Martavis Bryant 21 versus Anquan Bolden's 8.5. Running backs. This one actually went heavily in favor of Possum Magic. Let's see. Doug Martin and Mark Ingram. Each one had a touchdown. Martin had 95 yards. Ingram had 56. While for Detonators, you had Alfred Blue and Jeremy Langford. Alfred Blue got you a 1.5, and Langford just under 6 points. So you were dominated there in the running back position, but you dominated in the tight end position and the flex with Delaney Walker versus Antonio Gates. You win that one 23 to 11. And in the flex, you traded the guy you traded to Possum, Duke Johnson. He had only 7.2, while you have Javorius Allen, Buck Allen, who has come to life thanks to the season-ending injury to Justin Forsett. Opened the door for him to get a lot of playing time. And with Joe Flacco out, the quarterback for Baltimore has been Matt Schaub, who has pretty much been the check-down champion to Javorius Allen. Said he had Allen had 12 catches for 100 yards this week. So, actually, he ended up with 35 points for you. Huge score there. Possum took it with your kickers, 6-1. But defenses, Pittsburgh Steelers actually ended up doing really well. While Possum rolled the dice, went against Denver, and used Minnesota's defense, who Minnesota actually got steamrolled by the Seattle Seahawks. Didn't really see that coming. I think the only points they salvaged the day for you because the points that were scored by the Vikings was a 100-yard kickoff return. So you got 9 points there. Give you something. Steelers defense, I think they actually ended up with about a 40-point game. I'm not exactly sure what Denver would have been, but so this matchup was decided by 58 points. So I'm not sure having used Denver's defense would have made a difference. So that's pretty much just the way it went this week for Possum Magic. Said a couple of disappointing scores for him in key areas. Said quarterback only 25. Tough game for your defense. He's battling some Possum going into the playoffs, battling some injuries. So but he did get the bye week, so it's gonna be interesting to see how he fares here coming up with some tough playoff matchups down the road for him. As for the Detonators, we say goodbye to them for the 2015 season, finishing 5-8 and in 10th place. Actually, for as much as I don't really I've never understand why in the podcasts I apparently I refer to Brian as an inferior opponent or something like that. I don't know that those words, other than 2 seconds ago, have ever come out of my mouth. But um, detonators, I commend you because you started off, as we all know, 0 and I think you were 0-5, but you ended up the season 5-8, so you finished 5-3. Uh, I was it 0-5 or 0-6, something like that. But you wheeled and dealed. You made some trades. You that worked out in your favor. Made a run for it. Um, Once you got Phillip Rivers, which ended up, I mean, I think you traded Phillip. What did you trade Phillip for Phillip Rivers? Like Emmanuel Sanders, who has done absolutely nothing. So you win that trade. I mean, he basically gave you Phillip Rivers for nothing. And Rivers went on to put up some huge scores for you. And I think you almost turned around and had like back-to-back 200-point weeks once you got Phillip Rivers. Let's see. You had got Bryant back from his suspension. You made the trade for Langford, who those couple weeks, I mean, you knew that he was only going to be good for you for those couple weeks because he was really just filling in for Forte. Who knows what he could be down the road? He could be a keeper for next year. So that trade could definitely work out in your favor. Sid Macklin, you got him in a trade. He's been coming on, doing pretty well, especially recently. So, let's see. You got rid of the dead weight of T.Y. Hilton. Wasn't getting you much from there. Taking a look at your bench real quick. So I think that was probably the biggest key to your season early on was your quarterback play. So you started 0-5. I think the quarterbacks you came out of the draft with were Bridgewater, his second year, Winston, rookie quarterback. I want to say you had Russell Wilson too. So you were kind of juggling inexperienced, hit or miss quarterbacks the first couple weeks of the year. So that was tough. I mean, you came out of the draft. Let me take a look and see. Oh, you're not on that side. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So Brian, you actually didn't draft a quarterback until the 7th round this year. That was probably a big difference maker, and the ones that you got didn't really pan out. So you had to make a trade. Of course, can't forget Jamal Charles going down week 4 or 5, somewhere in there. That was a huge loss for you. Your first round pick. So yeah, you started 0-5. Weren't doing too much, but then said you made some trades, worked some stuff, and you bounced back and said you had back-to-back 200-point weeks. But then you had let's take a quick look at your totals here. You had a couple down weeks, but you also had a couple big weeks. Said after those 200-point performances, you had a low one, but then you had a 170, you had a 180, you had another low one, but you had another 180 and a 198 to finish the season here. So you definitely wheeled and dealed and made some positive things happen for your team here in the second half of the season. Made a run for it. Unfortunately, it was maybe a little too late. But I say kudos to you. You managed to make the most of the trades that you were involved in. Made some tough calls, and down the stretch did some things that worked out well for you. So But still, I don't know. I still think trading Philip Rivers was a bad idea. Even though he's been kind of lost without Keenan Allen. That's going to be a tough thing. That's probably going to be the most interesting, one of the most interesting points of the playoffs here coming up is how Tree fares with Philip Rivers, because the past couple weeks he has just not been doing it as he was in the early to middle of the season. So something really interesting to keep our eyes on here as the playoffs heat up and come full circle next couple weeks. So like I said, Possum has the bye this week, so we're not going to get to see what happens here, at least until week 15. So we'll see. So yeah, that's it for the Detonators, his season. Like I said, things were, I said you lost Jamal Charles, that was a big blow. Your receiving core just, so you were without Bryant. You had Evans and Hilton, who really have underperformed quite a bit this year. But you turned it around and did some pretty good things managerial-wise with your team the last half of the year. Made a run for it, like I said, but just wasn't quite enough. And you finished in 10th place. Possum Magic, we won't say goodbye to you, as we know you are still active in the season. So the 6 teams that we say goodbye to, Raritan Pups, FC Bahorik, Detonators, Torkovicic, Huber Squashers, and the Mighty Midgets. We thank you for a good season. It was competitive. Well, for the most part, except for the Pups. Unfortunately, for you, once again, you guys competed every single week. I think, looking here now, it seems to be, as the years go by, it's been more and more of a challenge year to year. People are just coming out of the draft with what appear to be really good teams. Like, it's hard to say coming out of the drafts, beginning of the week, first week or two, like, who is going to just run away with it. There's never anyone who stands out as running away with it. So it was a good season for all of you guys, even though, like I said, only half of us can make the playoffs, half of us can't. So even though we all want to, and of course we all want to be the final champion, but only one can be, and 11. So every year, 11 people are going home disappointed, and one person is happy at the end of the year. So we all hope that we are going to be that one who gets lucky. So to those 6 guys, we will see you again next year in 2016. Looking forward to it. Some people already wanting to know if it's draft day yet, but unfortunately, it's not even draft year yet. So, but patience. We're almost there. We'll be there soon. But so take the salt of defeat this year and not play on your lack of playoff contention, and turn that into inspiration for coming back strong next year and giving it your best. As for the playoff teams, like I said, the Rook and Possum Magic get first round byes. We've got Vanilla versus the Isotopes this week, and we've got Dubsy Hooligans versus Chips My Boy. So only 2 matchups coming up here in the first week of the playoffs. I won't get into it much here, because that's not really my job to preview anything, but one of the things that stands out for me really is, I think for the Dubsy Hooligans versus Chips My Boy matchup, this is really a tough spot for Chips, And even though Dub C is kind of in a tough spot thanks to injuries on his team, Chips, my boy, I think this matchup is going to be decided on Thursday night because Chips has Carson Palmer and Michael Floyd and his kicker, all of Arizona, going up against the Minnesota Vikings, who he's got Adrian Peterson. And as we know, Cardinals are a great defense. Are they going to shut down Adrian Peterson? Not shabby themselves are the Vikings defense. They, of course, they got shredded by Russell Wilson and the Seahawks this past week. Adrian Peterson got stuffed by the Seahawks. Hugely disappointing game for Minnesota Vikings. So the question is their defense going to come back on this short week? Are they going to be angry? Are they going to play well? Or is Carson Palmer going to be able to find a way to carve them up like Russell Wilson did last week? So if Carson Palmer has a great game and is able, they are at home, it is in Arizona. Said you can't take the Vikings defense lightly. They've been good all year long except for last week. So said will they be deflated from this past defeat, or are they going to come back angry and play a good game? That's going to be I think that's going to be the difference maker. If Carson Palmer has a good game and scores 40 to 50 points, this one could quite possibly fall in favor of Chips. If Adrian Peterson can do anything, this one I think could go in favor of Chips, my boy. Dub C, if Minnesota steps up and plays well defensively against Carson, maybe shuts down Michael Floyd, like I said, that opens the door for you for this matchup, maybe stealing it. So I say stealing it, even though technically you're the, you're the underdog according to Yahoo's projected points, but you are the higher seeded team. So I don't know, you're both the favorite and the underdog at once here. So, but I said I won't really get into my matchup. I'll let those other guys do it. But like I said, with this matchup is very interesting because it's so heavily influenced by the Thursday night game, and it's two good defenses going against each other, which is not good news if you're looking for big fantasy points. So, but Carson Palmer has gotten you here. He could do it. He could not. It's going to be interesting. But like I said, I think that this matchup, for the most part, will be decided on this Thursday night game if the Vikings do well or if Arizona does well. I think we'll be able to tell which way this matchup is going to go. So that's my two cents on that matchup. I won't get into anything else. I've already gone to 90 minutes here, I see, on this week. So my throat's starting to hurt from talking so much. It's unusual for me, so I should probably stop. But wanted to take a few minutes here to acknowledge each team that we won't be discussing anymore for the rest of the year as we put them to bed. But everyone played well. Always, I said this before. Each passing season has been getting harder and harder. You got to really bring your A game to the draft, and especially, teams are people are doing well with their keepers, and they're doing well in the draft. It's such a competitive league every year. You never know where the chips are going to fall. You look at it, you just don't know. It's so competitive, and even just looking at the final standings, we only had there's only a couple game difference between second place and 10th place. So, only a 2 game difference between 4th place and 9th place. So it's tough all year long. Um, Even if someone's like the Pups or FC, they were down a lot of the year. Detonators, both Detonators and Pups started 0-5. But it was tough to look at their lineup each week and think, oh, this is going to be easy. FC or Detonators or whoever, oh, I've got this one, no problem. You never, I don't know about you guys, but I never ever go into a matchup thinking this one's going to be a cakewalk, no problem. Because everyone, well, outside of the Pups this year, everyone's lineup is capable of putting up a good enough score to get a win. Everybody's just they're getting good at it. So I love it. I'm in favor of everybody I said, please, I want that challenge to bring your A game every single year and make it so it's not easy. Where's the fun in it if it isn't easy? So, all right, I am winded from all of this, so I'll finish here. We'll let the podcasters take over to preview the first week of the playoffs, and so there's only 2 matchups this week, and should be a short review next week, as not too much to talk about. So I guess I'll make up for it. I'll make up for the long one this week with the short one next week. But to me, it was just important. I wanted to acknowledge the teams who are gone and maybe try to give them a little summary and goodbye for the season. So hopefully you guys don't mind the length of this one too much. So all right, that's pretty much it for this week. It's been a great season, always competitive, another good year. So much has gone on. It's hard to believe that here we are coming up on week 14. This season just went by really fast. It was a good one. Just another great year. So thank you, even to the guys who aren't going on to the playoffs. Thank each and every one of you for a great season, great drafts, great managerial things with a lot of people. Back and forth. The smack talk has been gone to some new levels at some points this year. We had the side prize thing. Give us a little shout out. That was always nice. So yeah, a lot of good things happened this year. Like I said before, we had Drew Brees set the single week point record. We had the Wolves set the single week lowest point total. So a lot of things happened this year that maybe kind of went under the radar, but made it, as the recap person, made a lot of interesting things for me to notice here as the year went on. So, all right, we'll see you here again next week, and I'll keep that one. I promise we will keep that one short and sweet. So, as we'll be saying goodbye to 2 teams and congratulating the 2 who move on to live for another day. So, all right, we'll see you guys here at the same time next week. And good luck to all 4 playoff teams. But this is for you, Gags, of course. Good luck, especially to me. So, see you guys then. Thanks. Bye.